The quiet man in seat 1A. The engines hummed gently as the jet waited on the tarmac. The first-class cabin of flight AZ-701 was nearly full, filled with high-profile business travelers, a few celebrities, and one quiet man seated by the window in seat 1A. He wore a plain black hoodie, jeans, and scuffed boots. His face was calm, almost peaceful. No bodyguard, no entourage. Nobody recognized him yet. Flight attendant Kylie adjusted her makeup in the galley mirror. "VIP in 1B, she whispered to another flight attendant. "Oil tycoon from Texas. B, extra nice." The crew bustled around, handing out drinks and adjusting seats. But when Kylie got to seat 1A, she paused. She frowned slightly. "Sir," she said with a fake smile, "this section is for first-class passengers only. Coaches toward the back." The man looked up. His eyes were tired but kind. "This is my seat. 1A. She tilted her head. "Let me check." She scanned her tablet, confused for a second, then sighed. "Fine. Stay seated." She turned on her heel and walked off. Keanu Reeves didn't say a word. He simply looked out the window. Soon the plane lifted into the sky. As the cabin settled, a flight attendant wheeled over a silver tray to the passenger in seat 1B. Lobster tail, fine wine, imported cheeses. The man grinned, already bragging on a call to someone named Carl. He didn't even notice Keanu beside him. Keanu hadn't been offered anything. No water, no menu, no blanket, not even a greeting after takeoff. He pressed the button for assistance. Nobody came. 20 minutes passed. A different flight attendant finally approached but seemed flustered. "Oh, yes. What do you need?" "Just some water, if that's okay." She didn't smile. "Uh-huh. I'll see if there's some left." He waited patiently. 20 more minutes. Nothing. He didn't push the button again. Back in the galley, Kylie laughed with another crew member. "He looks familiar, but probably some weirdo who got lucky with points. Did you see his boots?" They didn't know. They didn't know who he really was. And even if they did, would they have treated him any differently? An hour into the flight, turbulence rocked the cabin. Seatbelt signs blinked on. Drinks spilled in business class. The oil tycoon cursed and snapped for a towel. Kylie and another attendant rushed to help him, fussing over his shoes. Keanu gently leaned into the aisle and offered his napkin to an elderly woman nearby whose cup had tipped. "Here," he said. "No rush." She smiled. "Thank you, dear." As the attendants returned to the galley, they passed by Keanu again. Still no drink, no food. After the turbulence settled, the cabin crew prepared the second round of meals. Kylie returned to 1B with a second plate. Keanu turned slightly. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "May I see a menu?" She stared. "They're not printed anymore. We say them aloud." "Could you tell me, please?" "They're out," she snapped. "Everything's taken." She turned and walked off before he could respond. The oil tycoon leaned over. "Don't take it personally. They don't care who you are unless you're on the cover of Forbes." He laughed and went back to his champagne. Keanu chuckled under his breath. "Guess I'm not." He reached down and pulled a protein bar from his bag. He tore it quietly and chewed while staring into the clouds outside. In the cockpit, the co-pilot glanced back toward the cabin camera feed. "Hey," he said. "Is that Keanu Reeves in 1A?" The captain squinted. "That's him." "Should we let the crew know?" The captain shook his head. "They'll find out soon enough." Another hour passed. Still, nobody spoke to Keanu. A child in economy class walked up the aisle, rubbing his eyes. He stumbled. Keanu caught him before he fell. "Where's your seat, buddy?" 3. "I don't know." Keanu gently stood, picked the child up, and walked him to the back, asking softly where his parents were. The parents were panicked. When they saw Keanu, they froze. "Oh my, thank you," the mother whispered. Keanu smiled. "No worries." Back in first class, Kylie scowled when she saw Keanu returning from the back. "You shouldn't be walking around," she said coldly, "especially into economy. It's a security issue." He nodded politely. kid was lost. He's back with his family now." She turned and whispered to the other attendant. "This guy thinks he's a hero now, acting like he owns the place." But one man had noticed. The oil tycoon finally leaned over. "You helped that family. I didn't think anyone famous would ever do something like that." Keanu shook his head. "I'm not famous today. Just flying." The oil tycoon frowned. "Wait. You are Keanu Reeves, aren't you?" Before he could answer, the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. We'd like to thank our VIP guest in seat 1A for flying with us today, Mr. Keanu Reeves." Every head in the cabin turned. Jaws dropped. Murmurs filled the air. Kylie went pale. She rushed to the galley, her hands shaking. "Oh no, oh no. That was him?" one of the crew whispered. "We ignored him. We gave him nothing." "Oh no," she repeated, her voice cracking. As the plane landed, the crew scrambled. One tried to hand him a menu, another brought a champagne glass. Keanu didn't touch any of it. He just smiled politely. When the door opened at the gate, the airline director stood at the jet bridge, waiting nervously. "Mr. Reeves," he said softly. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Keanu shook his hand gently. "It's okay. I wasn't looking for special treatment, just respect." The director looked into Keanu's eyes. "You'll have it, I promise." Then Keanu said something that sent a chill down the man's spine. "But this crew, they didn't just ignore me. They disrespected every passenger who didn't look the part. That's a deeper problem." He handed the man a small envelope. "I've chartered this plane before," Keanu said, "and I won't do it again unless something changes." The director opened the envelope after Keanu walked away. Inside was a handwritten note and the words, "Fire the whole crew, not for me. For everyone else they'll mistreat." As Keanu stepped through the terminal, he was met by airport staff, not for applause, not for photos, but to say thank you. They had heard what happened mid-air, and behind him the crew stood in the galley, frozen in place, because their careers had just ended. But the lesson was just beginning. The ripples after. Landing news of what happened on flight AZ701 spread like wildfire across the terminal. By the time Keanu Reeves reached baggage claim, whispers followed him down every corridor. He didn't look left or right. He just walked calmly, like any other traveler, his only bag slung over one shoulder. But inside the airport lounge, the airline's top executives had already gathered. The note Keanu left had reached the CEO's desk within 20 minutes of landing. "This isn't just a celebrity tantrum," the CEO said. "He's pointing at a culture problem." The operations director frowned. They didn't know who he was. "Exactly," the CEO replied. "And they treated him like garbage. Now imagine how they treat someone without a voice, without money, without a platform." The room went quiet. "Fix it," the CEO said finally. "Start with that crew." Backwham. At home, Keanu didn't post anything about the flight. No tweets, no interviews, no dramatic statements. He sat in his quiet kitchen, poured a cup of tea, and looked out the window at the rain. His phone buzzed. It was a message from the airline's director of customer relations. A sincere apology, a promise to retrain staff, and a request. "Would you meet with us?" Keanu didn't reply right away. He sipped his tea and thought about the mother in economy, the child who had wandered off, and the way the flight crew had ignored every need except those of the wealthy and loud. He typed a short message back. "Only if we include people who've actually been mistreated, not just me." The next morning, social media exploded. A young woman named Lucy had posted a video. She sat on her bed wiping tears. "I was on that flight. I was in row 18. My son was the one who got lost, that man. I didn't realize until we landed. It was Keanu Reeves who brought him back to me." Her video spread fast. It was raw, emotional, honest. And when I tried to thank the flight crew, they didn't even look at me. They just kept walking. She held up a crayon drawing her son had made. It showed a stick figure with a kind smile. Underneath it, her son had written, The man who helped me. The comments flooded in. People began sharing their own stories of bad airline treatment. Lost bags, rude staff, ignored cries for help. But what made this different was Keanu's silence. He wasn't part of the noise. He didn't need to be. 2 days later, a group of 4 former flight attendants stood outside a small coffee shop in downtown Los Angeles. It was the same crew from Flight AZ-701. All of them had been dismissed. Kylie sat quietly with a coffee in her hands. She looked different now. No makeup, no fancy scarf, no smug smile. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know it. Was him." Her friend replied, "That's not the point. We shouldn't have needed to know." They sat in silence for a moment. "I've worked in first class for 6 years," Kylie said. "I thought I had people figured out. Rich, poor, faker. I thought I knew how to treat them based on a look. Maybe now you know better." Kylie nodded, slowly. "Maybe. But I lost everything." A woman walked by, recognized her from the news, and shook her head. No words, just disappointment. At the same time, Keanu met privately with the airline's CEO in a quiet room with no cameras, no press. Just truth. "Thank you for coming," the CEO said. Keanu nodded. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because this isn't the first time it's happened to someone. It's just the first time someone paid attention." The CEO leaned forward. "We're changing our training program. We're starting from zero." "Good," Keanu replied. "But don't just teach them to be kind to celebrities. Teach them to see people." The CEO paused, then said something unexpected. "Would you help us? Consult? Even just once?" Keanu hesitated. "I'm not a trainer." "You are," the CEO said, "in ways most people will never understand." Keanu agreed. "But on one condition. We bring in others. People like Lucy. People without voices." Days later, Keanu walked into a small conference room filled with airline staff, from trainees to longtime attendants. He stood at the front of the room with Lucy beside him. Lucy looked nervous but determined. She began, "I was ignored. I was overlooked." But a stranger stepped up. Not because he was famous, but because he cared. Keanu looked at the room and spoke gently. "You don't have to be perfect. You don't even have to be amazing. Just see people. Just look at them like they matter." Some attendants looked down. Others nodded. One woman wiped her eyes. It wasn't a lecture. It was a mirror. By the end of the session, people approached Lucy and thanked her. They hugged her. Some told her their own stories. Keanu stayed in the background. He never made it about himself. But something shifted in that room. Something that would ripple across hundreds of flights. Meanwhile, Kylie sat in her small apartment scrolling through videos. She watched Lucy speak. She saw Keanu in the background, quiet, listening. She clicked pause. And she cried. For the first time in years, she cried not because she was angry, but because she was ashamed. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she'd use. "Hello?" Lucy answered. Kylie's voice trembled. "This is Kylie, from Flight AZ-701. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Lucy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I forgive you." Those 3 words broke something open in Kylie. Keanu never expected what would happen next. The airline created a new initiative called Project Dignity, and they named the first training hall after a boy named Eli, the child who wandered off. At the entrance was a small crayon drawing under glass, the one Eli made, and underneath it, a simple message: "See the human." Whispers across the world, the storm had passed, but the echoes were growing louder. Across the world, people were watching, not just because Keanu Reeves had been mistreated, not because he had the power to fire a crew with one quiet sentence, but because he used that power to speak for those who couldn't. Project Dignity began rolling out in airports everywhere, not just in America. Headlines reached Australia, the UK, and parts of Asia. The message was simple. Respect doesn't cost anything, but ignoring someone could cost everything. Inside Keanu's home, he watched none of it. No news. No updates. He sat at a workbench, carefully sanding a piece of wood. He was building a bookshelf for a friend who'd lost their job and had to sell most of their belongings. It was how Keanu dealt with the world, by making small things for others that nobody asked for. His phone buzzed. A message from Lucy. Eli's drawing is now in 27 airports. He smiled softly, then went back to sanding. Meanwhile, in a tiny diner near Lax, two airline janitors, Maria and Robert, sat on a break sipping coffee. Both had been working in the industry for over a decade. They weren't flight attendants. They weren't executives. They cleaned trays, scrubbed bathrooms, and heard things most people weren't supposed to hear. "You hear about what happened with Keanu?" Robert asked. "Of course," Maria replied. "He didn't want special treatment, just basic kindness." Robert stirred his coffee. "I cleaned that plane after it landed. They left crumbs everywhere in first class. They didn't even clean it themselves." Maria chuckled. "Rich folks never do." "No," Robert said. "I'm not talking about the passengers. I'm talking about the crew." Maria's face changed. They both went quiet. In the airline's top boardroom, the CEO and senior leaders reviewed footage and incident reports from Flight AZ701 again. Not because they wanted to punish anyone else, but because something still didn't sit right. The CEO leaned forward. "Why was Keanu Reeves denied a meal?" The manager in charge of in-flight operations shifted uncomfortably. "Our logs show meals were loaded normally. We had full count. No shortages." "Then why? Didn't he get one?" The CEO asked again. "Crew said they were out." But that wasn't true. The room fell silent. A voice from the corner spoke. "What if they were told not to serve him?" Eyes turned. "What are you saying?" the CEO asked. "I'm saying it might not have been just bad service, it might have been intentional." Back in her small apartment, Kylie opened her email to find a new message. It was from an anonymous address. "You think you were fired because of bad behavior. You were, but you were also used." Attached was a voice recording. Kylie played it, her hands trembling. The voice was unmistakable. It was her supervisor's voice from before the flight. "If we see any surprise passengers bumped into first today, don't give them VIP treatment. Focus on the guests with black tags. No freebies for economy upgrades. Got it?" The realization hit her like a punch to the chest. They had been told not to serve passengers who didn't look like they belonged, and she'd gone along with it. Keanu met with Lucy again the next day. This time they sat in a small park. Eli ran in circles nearby, laughing with other kids. Lucy looked thoughtful. "I saw an article. They think someone gave instructions not to serve you." Keanu nodded. "I heard something too. So this goes deeper." He looked at her. "You still willing to speak up?" She didn't hesitate. "Always." Keanu smiled. "Good. We might need to go higher." 2 weeks later, Keanu and Lucy were invited to speak at an aviation ethics summit. Not a fancy one, not for cameras, but for people who worked behind the scenes, trainers, union leaders, policymakers. Keanu stepped onto the stage, wearing jeans and a plain shirt. He looked like any other man in the room, but when he spoke, the room leaned in. "I didn't come here because I was hungry on a flight. I came here because something is broken. People are being judged before they open their mouths. Passengers, crew, even kids." He paused, his voice steady. "What if the person you ignored today was the one who could have helped you tomorrow? What if that quiet old man in row 28 used to be a firefighter? What if that nervous mother in row 18 was holding her life together by a thread?" He looked toward Lucy, then back to the room. "We all wear masks. We all carry hidden stories. So stop choosing who deserves kindness. Give it to everyone." Applause echoed in the room. Not polite, not forced. Real. After the event, a man approached Keanu in the hallway. He was wearing a pilot's badge, maybe late 50s, eyes heavy with regret. "I flew with that supervisor before," he said quietly. "They've done it before, not just to you." Keanu nodded. Then we need to expose that. The pilot slipped him a note. It's all in. Here, who gave the orders, who allowed it? That night, Keanu called the airline's CEO. We need to talk again, he said. The CEO sounded tired. I was afraid of that. You're going to want to see what I have. As the days passed, more passengers came forward. Not all of them were on flight AZ701. Some were from years ago. A man in a wheelchair who was left alone in a terminal. A student who was humiliated in front of a cabin because she wore second-hand clothes. A woman denied boarding because her accent was misunderstood as aggressive. People started using a hashtag, "We see the human," but for Keanu, it wasn't about hashtags. It was about change, and now he had proof that someone high up had encouraged discrimination, not just on one flight, but across multiple routes. It was time to bring the truth forward. Meanwhile, Kylie sat at the back of a courtroom building, waiting to give a statement to an internal review panel. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. Yes, she said clearly. We were told to focus on appearance. We were told to assume certain people weren't real VIP guests. And yes, I followed that. I was wrong. I regret it. Someone in the room asked, "Why are you speaking up now?" Kylie looked toward the glass where sunlight streamed in. Because I finally saw the human. Keanu walked into the airline's headquarters carrying the note the pilot gave him, the voice recordings, and a binder filled with statements from dozens of passengers and crew. He laid it on the CEO's desk. You asked for the truth, he said. Here it is. The CEO opened the binder. As he turned each page, his face grew more serious. This isn't about a meal, he said quietly. No, Keanu replied. It never was. Behind closed doors, the air inside the CEO's office felt heavier than usual. Papers were scattered across the polished desk, each one more damning than the last. The binder Keanu had brought was open to a statement from a young man named Harun, a law student from Egypt who had been taken off a flight 2 months earlier without explanation, no apology, no refund. Sir, the CEO said, rubbing his forehead, if this gets out, the damage to the company will be deserved, Keanu said gently, because it's already been done to your passengers. Silence. Keanu sat calmly, across from the CEO, no anger in his eyes, just a quiet, steady resolve that made his words even more powerful. This isn't cancel culture, he added. This is accountability. People trusted you with their dignity, and you let them down. The CEO swallowed hard. What do you want me to do? He finally asked. Keanu's answer came without hesitation. Clean house. Remove anyone who gave those orders. Public apology. And hire a third-party team to audit every flight crew's behavior. Not just on camera. Real checks. Real listening. The CEO nodded slowly. Done. But Keanu wasn't finished. And bring Lucy in. Give her a seat at the table, not just for show, for policy. Across town, Lucy sat in a modest apartment watching her son Eli draw shapes on the living room floor. She had no idea what was coming until her phone rang. The voice on the line was warm but formal. Ms. Lucy Mitchell? This is Elaine Morrow, head of Aviation Passenger Affairs. You've been nominated for the National Passenger Advisory Board. Lucy blinked. Me? Yes. Your story has moved people, and you've shown strength, not just in speaking up, but in standing by your values. Lucy covered her mouth, trying not to cry. I don't have a college degree. I'm just a mom. Exactly, Elaine said, and that's why we need your voice. 3 days later, a live broadcast was announced. The airline's CEO would speak publicly for the first time about the incident involving Flight AZ701 and everything uncovered afterward. Reporters lined up. Camera crews crowded the conference room. Live streams were scheduled on every major network, but nobody expected what happened next. The CEO stepped to the microphone, took a deep breath, and said, I failed. We failed. He paused. We ignored signs. We created a culture of appearance-based service, and we hurt people. Not just Mr. Reeves, but families, Students, disabled passengers, anyone who didn't fit the profile. He turned and gestured. Lucy walked up to the podium beside him. She wore a simple blue dress and held a paper with trembling hands. "I used to be afraid to speak up," she said into the microphone. "But after that flight, after seeing someone, like Keanu Reeves, show kindness when the people trained to care didn't, I realized silence helps no one." Then she added, "We don't need better snacks. We need better souls." The room fell quiet. The speech went viral within hours. Kylie watched the entire thing from a small TV in her friend's garage. She hadn't worked since being fired. Her savings were nearly gone. But something about Lucy's words struck her. Better souls. That night she pulled out a blank notebook and began writing a letter, not to get her job back, but to offer her story as part of the investigation. "Dear Board," she wrote, "I was part of the problem, but I want to be part of the change. Here's everything I saw, heard, and failed to speak against." Keanu stayed away from the cameras. He preferred it that way. But people noticed his influence. Other airlines quietly began reviewing their own policies. A ripple turned into a wave, and then something unexpected happened. The National Transportation Board reached out. "Mr. Reeves, we'd like you to consult on a new passenger treatment initiative." Keanu chuckled on the phone. "I'm just an actor." "You're more than that now," the agent replied. "You reminded people that dignity isn't first class only." Keanu paused, then said, "All right, I'll help." A week later, Project Dignity reached its next phase. Airports began installing what they called the human gate, a small, quiet area for staff and passengers who needed calm. Inside were chairs, books, drawings, and a single framed crayon picture. Eli's drawing, below it, a message engraved into wood. "You never know who you're sitting beside, so treat them like someone important, because they are." Kylie received a letter. In the mail, it was from the airline. "Thank you for your honesty. You are not rehired, but your testimony helped change everything. Please accept this invitation to a closed session on ethics reform." She sighed, smiled faintly, and wrote on her calendar, "Ethics session. A new beginning." Lucy walked into her first official advisory board meeting. She carried a backpack instead of a purse and wore secondhand shoes. But when she entered, the room stood, even the CEO. She sat beside Keanu, who had joined quietly as a guest that day. He leaned over and said, "You ready?" Lucy nodded. "Always." They reviewed proposals, debated real scenarios. And when one board member suggested budget cuts on passenger services, Lucy raised her hand. "The moment we decide profit is more important than people," she said, "we've already lost." The room went quiet, and then they agreed to her motion. Outside, the building news crews waited for a quote from Keanu, but he slipped out the side door unnoticed. He wasn't there for headlines. Instead, he drove across town to visit Maria and Robert, the two janitors who had cleaned Flight AZ701 after that unforgettable journey. He shook their hands and said, "You matter too. I wanted you to know that." Maria's eyes welled with tears. "No one's ever said that before." Keanu smiled gently. "Then let me be the first." Meanwhile, high up in the airline's corporate tower, an internal report landed on the desk of a retired board member. The report was full of names, people who had allowed the discriminatory policy to remain hidden for years. The board member stared at one name in particular, a vice president with a spotless record. But now, exposed. The board member picked up the phone. "We need to take this public." Behind the scenes, forces were still trying to stop the movement. Whispers of silencing former employees, deleting past incident logs, quietly paying off settlements. But Keanu had already seen through it. He was preparing for the next step. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. The walls began to crack. Early morning light crept through Keanu's window as he quietly opened a letter that had arrived without a return address. Inside was a typed message on plain white paper. They're covering it up, deleting logs, transferring blame. This goes higher than anyone thought. Keanu folded the letter slowly. There was no signature, no name, just truth. He sighed and stood up from his wooden desk. In the quiet stillness of his home, he brewed a small cup of coffee, tied his boots, and walked outside. The world was waking up. But in the world of airline executives, something was breaking. Inside a private boardroom, the CEO paced nervously. In front of him sat a stack of folders, each one filled with years of internal complaints that had never been made public. The incident on Flight AZ701 had forced open the floodgates: passenger mistreatment, ignored reports, fake evaluations, entire training modules skipped just to meet schedules, and now more whistleblowers were coming forward. How many? The CEO asked the ethics director. 47. And counting. How far back? At least 7 years. The CEO leaned forward, resting his head in his hands. We need to go public before this explodes. But before they could act, the first leak hit social media. A former crew trainer released a recording from a closed-door meeting held 2 years prior. On the tape, a senior VP could be heard saying, "First-class experience should be preserved. Don't waste your energy on people who don't look like they paid full price." The internet erupted. Hashtags returned stronger. See the human, or people. Not profiles, or Keanu was. Right news outlets around the world picked it up. Even late-night talk shows ran segments with clips of Lucy's speech playing next to Keanu's quiet walk through the terminal. But none of it was for attention. It was for justice. Meanwhile, Lucy sat in her living room with Eli on her lap, watching a special live segment. A host recounted the full story, calling it the turning point in modern air travel ethics. Lucy wasn't smiling. She was worried, because buried in the coverage was a whisper of retaliation. Someone from within the airline had contacted her, through a blocked number, suggesting she step back if she wanted to keep her son safe. She had told no one, until now. She looked at her phone and called the one person she trusted with everything. "Keanu?" she said softly. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Someone threatened us." Keanu's voice changed. Calm, but full of weight. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Keanu arrived quickly. He didn't ask questions. He didn't panic. He simply sat down across from Lucy and said, "Do you remember the plate number? Anything about the voice?" Lucy nodded. It was a woman. Calm. She said I should stop speaking in public. And then she mentioned Eli. Keanu leaned back. He took out his phone and dialed, not the police, someone else. Within an hour, a quiet, tall man in a gray jacket showed up. His name was Dean, and he had worked private security for years. "We'll keep an eye on the place," Dean said. "No one touches them." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Keanu simply nodded. "You spoke up for others. Now we protect you." That night, Keanu stood outside his home, thinking. The stars were out, but his mind wasn't at peace. This had become more than an airline problem. This was about how people with power used silence as a shield. He opened his laptop and began typing. Not a script, not a speech, but a timeline. Every incident, every story, every whistleblower account that had been shared with him. He wasn't writing a complaint. He was building a case. The next morning, Keanu met with an investigative journalist named Soren Park. Soren was known for exposing corruption. He wasn't interested in fame. He wanted truth. Keanu handed over the binder and the digital files. "You can publish, but be careful. People are being threatened." Soren opened the files, scanning quickly. His eyes widened. "This isn't just bad behavior, this is systemic abuse." Keanu nodded. "I know. I'll publish in 48 hours, Soren said. The airline's leadership got wind of the leak, just as the press started calling. The senior VP, who was now at the center of the scandal, called an emergency meeting. "Deny everything," she said. "Blame the crew. Blame the trainers." But the CEO had changed. "No," he said firmly. "This ends now." He stood up. "You're fired. and I'll be testifying about everything you've done." Gasps filled the room. Someone said, "You can't fire her, she's connected to the board." The CEO turned to them. "Then we clean the board too." Soren's story went live at exactly 8:00 a.m. on a Monday morning. The headline was simple: Beyond. One flight, how airlines chose image over integrity and got caught. Within minutes, the article spread. It included interviews, photos, documents, even emails from the VP stating which passengers to exclude from VIP treatment. And at the center of it all, not a quote from Keanu, but a drawing by Eli, a small boy's reminder that kindness doesn't wear a suit. The airline's stock dropped overnight, but their public respect soared because for the first time, they weren't spinning it. They were owning it. Lucy was offered a permanent position on the National Ethics Panel. She accepted. Kylie was contacted to help design a new training video for flight crews, showing what not to do and how to rebuild trust. And Maria and Robert? They were quietly promoted, given full benefits, recognized for being the invisible glue that kept flights human. One evening, Lucy visited the new airport terminal in Denver. At Gate 9, she stopped in front of a small statue. It wasn't of Keanu, it was of Eli's drawing, a bronze version. The stick figure smiling, holding a child's hand. Below it, a plaque read, "The man who helped me," drawn by Eli Mitchell, reminder to treat every passenger with honor. Lucy stood there for a long time. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Behind her, a quiet voice said, "He's got your eyes." She turned. Keanu was there, smiling gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't owe me thanks," he said. "This happened because you refused to be silent." But the story wasn't finished yet, because buried deep in one of Soren's leaked documents, a line caught Keanu's eye. Internal contracts with third-party agents were used to monitor problem passengers. Keanu read it again. Something about it didn't feel right. "Lucy," he said softly, "they may have been watching more than just you." And just like that, a new chapter began. The final truth. Keanu Reeves sat alone in his living room, staring at a single line of text printed on a page. Internal contracts with third-party agents were used to monitor problem passengers. His mind replayed the phone call Lucy received. The calm voice, the quiet threat, the fear in her eyes. Someone had watched her. And possibly more people too. Passengers who had dared to speak up. Whistleblowers. Even him. A knock came at the door. It was Dean, the private security agent. "I dug deeper," Dean said. "You were right, there's a contract with a firm called AeroGuard Solutions. They were paid to monitor complaints, flag non-preferred passengers, and even track them post-flight." Keanu's heart sank. "And the woman who threatened Lucy?" Dean nodded grimly. "Works for them. I traced the voice to a contractor named Delia Ward. Former intelligence." Keanu stood slowly. "It's time we end this." The next day, Keanu and Dean met with Lucy at a secure location. She listened in shock as Dean explained everything, how some passengers who spoke out were monitored, how certain profiles were flagged and shared across internal systems to warn flight crews in advance. "They had a list," Dean said. "You were on it, Lucy." Her voice trembled. "I'm just a mother. Why would they watch me?" "Because you spoke up," Keanu said quietly. "And that scared them more than anything." Lucy looked at Eli, who sat nearby coloring with crayons. "We have to go public," she said. Keanu nodded. "Yes, but this time we don't go through the airline, we go straight to the government." A week later, Keanu and Lucy testified before a joint Senate committee on aviation ethics and privacy. It wasn't filmed, no headlines, but the people in that room listened. Lucy spoke first. Her voice cracked, but her words didn't falter. "I was threatened, followed, not because I broke a law, but because I wanted dignity for myself and my son." She paused and held up Eli's drawing. "This picture has traveled the world, but behind it is a boy who was almost silenced by fear. We can't let that happen again." Then Keanu spoke. This isn't just about airlines. It's about trust. When we walk into a plane, a hospital, a courtroom, we expect to be seen as human beings, not as profiles, not as problems, and definitely not as threats for asking to be treated with decency. The room was still, and then one senator stood and said, "You've been heard." Within weeks, the committee launched a federal investigation into AeroGuard Solutions and their role in unlawful surveillance. The company was shut down. Delia Ward was charged with unlawful threat and intimidation. The leaked database of flagged passengers was deleted, and reparations began for those affected. The airline, now under new leadership, announced a total overhaul of its corporate structure. More importantly, it introduced a passenger bill of rights, co-written by people like Lucy, Kylie, Maria, and yes, even Robert, the janitor. It was called the Human Dignity Charter. Keanu refused to put his name on it. "This isn't about me," he said. It never was. One evening, months later, Keanu visited a small high school auditorium where Lucy was invited to speak. She stood on stage wearing a simple sweater, her hair tied back. The room was filled with parents, teachers, students, none of whom had ever heard her story before. "I used to think I didn't matter," she began. "I thought I was invisible. But then a man gave my son a napkin, and the world changed." She looked down at Eli, now seated in the front row. "You don't need power to make change. You need courage." When she stepped off stage, applause filled the room. But her eyes were on Keanu. "You stayed?" she whispered. "Of course," he smiled. "I always will." Later that night, as Keanu walked alone through a quiet city street, a stranger stopped him. She was young, probably a college student carrying books and a tired smile. "You're Keanu Reeves," she said. He nodded softly. "I just wanted to say thank you, not for the movies, for what you did, with the flight, and Lucy." Keanu smiled. "Thank you for seeing the story, not the face." She blinked, a little surprised, and nodded. As she walked away, Keanu looked up at the night sky. Quiet, peaceful, full of stars. He whispered to himself, "We see the human, or we lose everything." Sometime later, at LAX Terminal B, a wall was built. Not of concrete or metal, but of photos and drawings, a tribute to stories that changed the world. One panel showed Keanu in seat 1A, drawn in crayon. Another showed Lucy holding Eli, and another the quote that echoed across thousands of airports, "See the human." In the end, the meal didn't matter. The disrespect did. But more importantly, the silence that followed could have buried the truth. Instead, it lit a fire. And because one quiet man in seat 1A decided to act with kindness, not pride, the world began to see each other again.